Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to another video. This video is very, very late in the game, and I fully admit this. Also, lighting a little questionable today, so I do appreciate you guys bearing with me here as we film. But today I'm going to do top 23 of 2023. Now, I realize it is May, that too coming to the end of May, and we're about to hit that, 6-month mark into the year. But I kind of mark my reading from June. And the reason why I do that is because I feel like when I was in English classes, when I was younger, middle school, high school, college years, like you always associate like a certain time period with your reading vibes. You know what I mean? And so for me, yes, January is a very, very special time. And obviously that's when I'm keeping count tracks of all my books and everything like that. But there's just something special about the summer months when you get to sit down and read the books you like. And then obviously when September, August roll around, then you're starting to look into the books you're reading for school and all that kind of stuff, lectures and all that good thing. So I decided, in reminiscence of the fact that, my birthday month is June, and the fact that I've always been into reading ever since I was a little kid as well, and that I haven't done this video yet. And I was just looking back at all the books I read last year, even just a few weeks ago, on Goodreads, and just kind of like going through reading journals and things like that. I was like, it might be fun to do a wrap up 2023 top reads of 2023. So with that being said, I have 23 books to get through. So we're just gonna kind of jump into the video here, if you don't mind. But I have a little bit of, no, I don't have a little bit of everything. I have a lot of fiction. I have one nonfiction book, I think, that made this list for me. And most of these books I did end up reading physical copies of the book, or at some point I was reading the physical copy of the book, even if I was listening to Audible at the same time. But the majority of these books I have actually read in person. There's a few of them where I either read them on my Nook or it was like purely Audible, and I don't have physical copies. And for those, I do have pictures, which I will show on my phone and then also post in the video as well for anyone who is interested on those books. But without further ado, let's hop into it. So first and foremost, I wanted to kind of knock out the Sarah J. Maas, because we know that's going to show up. We just do. I'm a Moss girl. I don't know what to say. It's part of my lifestyle now. I'm a Moss girl. And so there were a few books that I read this past 2023 which really struck a chord with me. The first one being The Crescent City, House of Sky and Breath. Now, I did read this series first two books, so basically Crescent City and House of Sky and Breath, before I read Throne of Glass. So in order, I did ACOTAR, then I did Crescent City, then I did Throne of Glass. So it was like a very weird way of reading the series. If I had to pinpoint a way to read her books, I would say start with Throne of Glass, because Throne of Glass and that series is very much young adult vibes. There's a lot of fantasy. There is a lot of, what am I trying to say? There is a lot of politics in that book. Romance is not as big, but it definitely also allows you to kind of see her character development and understand the worlds that she's creating. So it's easy to jump into those books. So I would say start with Throne of Glass. And then as the books proceed in Throne of Glass, the series also gets more intense and more complicated. And so it's just fun. It's a fun series to read. And quite honestly, you will not regret it. You will not regret putting time into reading those 8 books if you are a fantasy lover, guaranteed. Then I recommend reading ACOTAR. ACOTAR is definitely adult. It definitely has spice in it, but it's also very beautifully done fantasy. The first book in particular really gave me Beauty and the Beast vibes, and then from there it just kind of takes its own shape. I will say when it comes to the ACOTAR series, the first 4 books go together, and then the last book that she's written that has been released in that series is specific to a side character, or a couple of side characters, I should say. But it's still within that world. And that book is really fun too in its own way. For me personally, I had a hard time appreciating Nesta's character. I understand where she's coming from. And I do think that a lot of the way in which Sarah J. Maas wrote in that book, it was also kind of exploring PTSD and things like that, because all of her female characters have the weight of saving the world on their shoulders, and they've all been through their own traumas. So I appreciate why that character is the way that she is. She's just not my favorite character, but I do think she redeems herself in the 3rd book in this series. But that had nothing to do with any of relevance to the top 2023 books. But that was just my recommendation. I would read Throne of Glass, then ACOTAR, then the Crescent City series, because this is the one that's most involved and also has a lot of arcs in it that connect to other books that she's written in the past. Not that you have to read the other books to be able to appreciate this series, but I do think that it's more enjoyable because a lot of the concepts that she's talking about and a lot of the world building that she's doing and a lot of the information dumping that she does is more um, pertinent and has more value if you've read the other books first. So that being said, this book I did finish in 2023. It was a absolute favorite of mine. This was a 5-star book. For me, the Crescent City first book, which is House of Earth and Blood, that book I felt like is very good, but it was more of a 4-star read for me. It wasn't quite that 5-star mark. This one I felt like had a lot more going on. I really love Tharion's character. I think he's a really, really fun character that you get to delve into more in this book. I also really enjoyed some of the side characters like Declan and all those characters who are Rune's really good friends. I really enjoyed reading Rune's perspective in certain things. And I appreciated Bryce a lot more in this book than I did in the first book. To be quite honest, the first half of the book, of the first book, I did not care for Bryce. I did not like her at all. She's the main character lead. But by the time we got into the second book, I could understand her character a little bit better. I appreciated her a little better. I could also understand Danica's character a little bit better. So I think in general, this book was the 5-star for me in the Crescent City series. Now, I have read all 3 books. The third one I did read recently, obviously, in the year of 2024, because it only released in January. But I do think personally, this is the 5-star in that series for me. I also just love this cover. This is the Barnes & Noble's special edition cover, and it's just stunning. I love these covers, and I will be getting the Barnes & Noble special edition cover for Crescent City 3 when it comes out in paperback. You can believe, because this is just gorgeous. So that's book 1. We've already wasted 6 minutes just talking about one book, so it's going to be a long one, guys. Make sure you have your tea or your coffee with you. And if it's evening, make sure you have your food, your juice, your wine, your water, whatever your drink of the day is, because you're going to need it. Moving on. So the next book, like I said, this is in no particular order. So the next book that I have on here is Beach Read. Now, Emily Henry is one of my absolute favorite authors, and this is one of the first books that she ever published. She has 5 books out now, and I am currently reading the 5th book that released this month in April of 2024. And I have to say that out of all the books that I've read by her, Book Lovers is my absolute favorite. That book is incredible. It's absolutely witty. It's funny. And I relate to that main character so much. I really enjoy both her and the man she falls in love with. But Beach Read is a close second favorite of mine. This book is absolutely heartwarming. It's beautifully written. The characters have so much depth to them outside of just their relationship. And you can really appreciate how they fall in love, how they become a couple, because it is a romance, right, at the end of the day. But I will say there's a lot of breadth to this book. This is the British cover. I have a few of the covers in the British cover because I just like the color schemes a little bit better, and then I have a few of them in the US editions as well. But this one in particular, I just loved this cover, and I thoroughly enjoyed this book, and Gus just makes me gush. So I would strongly recommend this for anyone who's looking for a fun, happy, enjoyable, fast-paced, but memorable romance for the summer. So yes, definitely a top of 2023. Then we have The Library of the Unwritten. Now this also actually showed up in my series video that I made last week. If that is something you're interested in, if you're a big series girly or a guy and you just love reading any kind of series because it feels like you're getting more bang for your buck, if you know what I mean, then you should definitely check out this series, because the series as a whole was part of my 5-star top favorites. But Library of the Unwritten was my favorite one in the series, and this definitely makes the top 23 of 23 for me. This book is more dark academia. It is basically set in the wing of the unwritten library in hell, where basically the librarian is in charge of making sure that all of these books are taken care of, but they can't get out into the real world and cause mayhem and havoc. Basically, the concept is these books are not finished. They have been started by an author, but they have not been completed yet. And so many of the characters in the books they take on personalities and they have traits of their own, but they're unable to express themselves, and they can't answer the end of their story, and that's why they're trapped in this universe of hell. And there's multiple different libraries across the universe in multiple different realms that each hold a different piece of literature, if you will. And that's kind of the concept of this book. But this first book does primarily focus on the Library of Hell, the librarian, one of the escaped characters from one of the books, which is why the librarian is on a journey to try and find him. And in the midst of all this, there also appears to be a very, very ancient, specific piece of paper that goes missing as well, which is believed to be part of the Devil's Bible, which can be used as a very dangerous weapon and should not be floating around in the mortal world. And so heaven then gets involved as well. And so you have multiple different characters with multiple different personalities that are kind of like flowing throughout this book. It's a very unique concept. I never really read anything about it. It's a book about books. Like, who doesn't love a book about books? One of the characters is literally referred to as Book at one point. So, I mean, just a wonderful, wonderful book. Quirky, quirky characters. If you're looking for something fun, fast-paced, easy to read, and enjoyable, I would strongly recommend looking into The Library of the Unwritten by A.J. Hackwith. And if you are a series person, there are 2 other books in this series, and it's a solid read. Would definitely recommend. Also, I know there's many people out there who are of the Catholic Christian beliefs. I personally am Hindu. So regardless of what your religious beliefs are, I did not personally find this book very offensive. If that is something that is particular to you and it is something that you don't feel comfortable reading or you feel like is not touched on appropriately, I cannot speak to that aspect, unfortunately, because of my personal background. But I do realize that I'm saying a lot of these words out loud, and I do know that some people believe in not talking about some of these topics. So I just wanted to put that out there for anyone who has trigger warnings or anything like that. But overall, I think this book was done very respectfully. I think it's done very well. I think it's primarily about the storyline, and it's a great vibe. It's a really fun read for anyone who's interested in kind of that dark academia vibe. Next up, on a totally different note, coming back to romance, we have Love Theoretically by Ali Hazelwood. Now, Ali Hazelwood's The Love Hypothesis is one of my all-time favorite romance books. I love that book. Love on the Brain, when it came out, I felt like it hit a little too close to nose, and it was almost like a copycat of The Love Hypothesis. And I also felt like Love on the Brain, the issue I had with it is the characters weren't as fun as the characters were made in The Love Hypothesis, for me personally. Now, this book, though, by Ali Hazelwood is kind of a completely different premise in the sense that it's still a STEM novel. It's still about women in STEM, which is great. But this girl basically changes out her personalities, and she offers to be a dating escort for people who are unable to find partners. So basically, she's an escort for hire, and she's kind of doing this on the side as she's a grad student, and she's just like trying to make it through life. Surviving, eating ramen noodles if she can't, while working on her passion, which is her PhD. And one guy that she happens to offer services to, his cousin or his elder brother, I can't remember the exact connection, or stepbrother, something like that, is the main love interest. And so he obviously likes her. She's not aware of this. And now she's like in this turmoil of trying to protect her hired client, but also falling for this guy simultaneously, and then also trying to survive her PhD. So I think overall this book was just very, very fun, quirky, easy read, entertaining, and just, I felt like Ali Hazelwood did again. Chef's kiss, really enjoy this book. Solid 5 stars, would recommend. Next up, we have The Dead Romantics by Ashley Poston. Now, everyone talks about The 7-Year Slip, and I fully admit that I'm very excited to read that book. It's already on my shelf. It's a bright yellow. It's beautiful. Summer is coming. It's on the TBR. It's going to be read for sure. And I fully appreciate that I will probably fall in love with that book because Ashley Poston is honestly one of my favorite authors, and I have enjoyed just about everything I've read from her, including her standalone fantasy as well as her rom-com series with like basis on various old Disney princess stories. Like, loved those series as well. But there's something really special about this particular book. And I just think it's very heartwarming. It's very fun. It's about this girl who can basically see ghosts and talk to ghosts. And she helps them cross to the next stage of the unknown, basically. It helps them find peace. And simultaneously, she is also an author. And so she is tasked with the job of being a ghostwriter for one of her favorite authors of all time. And she's super excited to take on this position. And in the midst of all this, she goes to see her new editor and realizes he's absolutely amazing. And then suddenly he's missing. Fast forward to the main part of the story where basically at the same time that she's dealing with these big life-changing things, her father passes away. And now she has to go home and help plan the funeral and be with her family. And it's just a lot of like family, a lot of small town vibes, a lot of like very, very cute romance, like just in general, just a very, very well done book. And I think Ashley Poston is not talked about enough. She should be talked about more. I think she's a phenomenal writer. I think she writes beautiful, beautiful novels. I think there's a lot of depth to what she's trying to say without it being too in your face. And I think overall she's just done a tremendous job with her books. And so I would definitely recommend The Dead Romantics. Next up, I'm just going to hold all three of these up because, again, they were in another video of mine, which was the series one. And that is The Kingdom of the Wicked series by Carrie Maniscalco. I absolutely adore these books. I don't fully agree that they're young adult, even though they are in the young adult section. But I think they are very, very well done books. They are just so much fun. So much fun fantasy. It's very dark. It is dark fantasy, but not in terms of the romance being dark. It's just like the concepts are dark. A lot of death, a lot of, darkness. A lot of it takes place in like circles of hell, the underworld, that kind of stuff. So if that's not your vibe, definitely stay away from these books. But I do think overall, really, really fun read. The romance is very hot and heavy. It's very, like I said, not young adult. There are definitely steamy scenes in these books. You can skip them for sure. They don't have to be read. So if you're not into spice, you can absolutely skip the spicy scenes. But there is a large portion of these books that do revolve around the spice too. But overall, the concept of the book, the way that the storyline is written, the adventures that these characters go on, the worlds that have been built, I really, really thoroughly enjoy these books. And I like a book that has a complex hero, a hero who's not absolutely perfect, but is dealing with their own demons and their own issues and things like that. And I think like turning Princes of Hell and this like witch into your main characters and writing them in a way where you understand them, appreciate them, and also see their flaws and can appreciate their flaws and how, even though they're flawed, they bring out the best in each other. That's what really spoke to me about these series. So again, would strongly recommend to anyone who's interested. And continuing in that series trend, I did very briefly mention all the Sarah J. Maas universe in that video that I mentioned that is about the series, but these two particular books I really enjoyed as well, from the Throne of Glass series. Now, these two books in particular stood out to me the most out of this series. I will say Kingdom of Ash is absolutely wonderful. Empire of Storms was really, really good. Heir of Fire was also decent, and then I also really enjoyed Assassin's Blade. Now, those four books are absolutely phenomenal, but they weren't quite 5 stars. Kingdom of Ash was. Kingdom of Ash was 100% a 5-star read. But I didn't include that in this video because it did kind of get finished in January, and so I didn't feel right putting it in this video. But for 2023, the two books that really stood the candle and were hardcore 5-star reads for me from that series, and a huge part of why I recommend that series to everyone, it was Crown of Midnight and Queen of Shadows. Now, both of these are with the Nerdy Ink covers on them. They do actually fit ish. They fit ish. You can fold them ish to get them to fit beautifully on the new released hardbacks that came out with the Sarah J. Maas series in hardback for Throne of Glass. That was recently released, I think, 2-3 years ago. But I absolutely adore these nerdy ink covers, and so I had to have them. And they were running a sale. So yeah, went ahead and did it. And this cover is also absolutely brilliant, one of my favorites, because Abraxos and Manon are two of my favorite characters who you will get introduced to when you read the Throne of Glass series. And those of you who have read Throne of Glass, you know what I mean when I say that. And then absolutely love Crown of Midnight, and I'm convinced this is Dorian, and so it's just meant to be. But I absolutely adore books. So yes, would strongly recommend. Thanks for listening to me talk about these books over and over and over again. Yeah. So guys, that was part 1 of the 2023 books. Now we're going to go on to stack number 2. Now the first book in stack number 2 was also in the favorite series book. You're seeing a theme here. I know. I fully understand. But this one was also really fun. This is Little Women by Louisa May Alcott, and I ended up reading all 4 books in this series. There is a reason this is a classic. There is a reason why people love this book, and there is a reason why there are papers written about it. There's a reason why you study it in your English composition classes, and you hear about it in English literature, and you hear about it in college when you're in your humanities classes, because it is beautiful. It is a beautifully written coming-of-age book. And in the 4-book series by Louisa May Alcott, I will say this one is precious. Little Women, just it touches your heart and your soul so deeply. Just seeing these four women grow up, their story from childhood to adulthood, how they find their sense of self, their belonging in community, really grow into who they are as people is just so beautifully done. And the relationships they have with each other, the sense of family, the family that you find, as well as the family you have, sisterhood, all of that. It's beautiful. I would not be surprised if I end up reading this book like at least once every 2 to 3 years because it is that good. It is that good. I fully recommend this. Next up, also in the classic vibes, I have Emma by Jane Austen. Now, with Jane Austen, I've read quite a few of her books. I've read Mansfield Park. I have read Sense and Sensibility. I have read Pride and Prejudice. And I loved all three of those books. And I decided I wanted to tackle Emma this past year. And I will say this book is hilarious. It's so good. It's so funny. And when I first got into this book, I did not realize this is the retelling, or Clueless, rather, I should say. Clueless, the movie, is a retelling of this book. And I only realized that as I got into the book, and I love Clueless. Clueless is one of my favorite movies of all times. It's like a 90s movie that I grew up with, and I remember loving it as a kid. I have always enjoyed, like, that aspect of life. Like, who doesn't want to see a rich life? And who doesn't want to see a girl who loves to do matchmaking and also comes into herself and understands what she's really looking for in a person? Like, it's such a cute love story. It's so well done, and it's all this. It's all this. So Jane Austen wrote my favorite movie back in the days, and I just read this book. Are we really surprised that this is a 5-star read for me? I don't think so. But for anyone who's interested, Emma is basically a very beautiful girl who's been raised in a very privileged life, and she prides herself on being able to read people and match them together. And so her whole thing is like she likes to set up matches and relationships for people. And she's also very bubbly, fun, lively. She also likes to take on people as projects and basically groom them in a way, in a good way, to like where they're in a higher class of society and present themselves better, because, you know, it's that time period. And she takes great pride in this. She's also very close to her father and her family, but she's never quite found the right person for her. And so it's kind of a journey for her from going from like this spoiled rich girl to really understanding herself and what she's looking for in a person, and also learning to appreciate other people and their opinions and their thoughts as well, and seeing the beauty in them. And it's not to say that she didn't see that before, but it's like it opens her eyes, and you kind of get to go on that journey with her. And I absolutely love this book. I fell in love with this book. I have read it now. I have listened to it on Audible. I have probably read this book at least 3 times in the span of 2 years. So I don't always put it on Goodreads just because I have read the book before, but I will say that this is a very, very pleasant read, a great summertime read, as well as we're coming into that summer era. And so for anyone who likes classics, anyone who likes Jane Austen, I don't think Emma is obviously still a very popular novel, but I feel like it's not as spoken about as, say, Sense and Sensibility or Pride and Prejudice for Jane Austen classics. So I would definitely recommend this for anyone who is interested. Next up, again, coming back to that dark academia vibe, is In My Dreams, I Hold a Knife. Now, I was first introduced to dark academia through the novel We Were Villains, and that book was incredible. Great autumnal read for me. I read the book as well as listened to the book at this point. The Audible was phenomenal. That's how I appreciated it the first time. And then once I read it, I went back and physically read the book as well, because there were certain aspects of the book where I was like, wait, I want to go back and see this relationship now knowing what I know. And that book was incredible. And I love dark academia. I love the that concept of understanding the dark side of humanity has always intrigued me. So I've always enjoyed those type of books. And this is kind of in that similar thread, in the sense that it is a group of friends. It starts off in an academic setting. One of them ends up dead. The murder's never been solved. They're at a reunion, and now all these crazy things are happening, and you're kind of going through both perspectives of stories. You're going through the story from when they were children, as well as how life looks now. And I think in general, it's just a very, very well done book. I would say this was a strong 5-star read for me. I finished it within a day. It doesn't have anything in it where I would say, like, this is the most phenomenal book you will ever read. I don't say that. But I will say that, like, if you're looking for something fun, fast-paced, a little, like, creepy crawly, enjoyable thriller vibes, this is definitely the way to go. I would also say for me personally, while I do put this on my 5-star list for 2023, and I do love this book, I would also recommend reading this in the fall. I think it definitely has a fall vibe if you're a mood reader. But in general, love this book and definitely recommend for any of those girlies out there who like an academic setting, dark academia vibes. I also very recently read Stephen King, and I haven't read too many Stephen King books. I think I've read Pet Cemetery, and then I've read The Shining, and that's about it. Those are the only two Stephen King books that I've ever read. And so I kind of wanted to branch out. And so I saw Fairy Tale, and I decided to pick this up because it's not quite horror, but it's supposed to be like still a dark twist on fairy tales. And so I was very intrigued because Grimm Brothers Fairy Tales is one of my favorite collection of short stories to have read. And I definitely like the Disney interpretations, but I also like some of those darker stories as well. And the fact that these characters go through those quirky scenes like we were talking about. And so Fairy Tale kind of has that vibe where this kid is basically growing up in a more challenging lifestyle. He and his father have recently become close, but in the past, he's lost his mother. His father was an alcoholic. I mean, he's just been through a lot as a teenager. And getting to that point where he's getting ready to go to college, he and his father have reconciled, they're in a good place, but kind of that transitionary period of becoming a man from being a boy. And in the midst of all this, there's a cranky old neighbor who lives nearby him and has no one, and everyone's kind of scared of him. And he ends up getting injured. And the man's dog basically finds our main character, Charlie, and pulls him over to help his owner. And he forms an attachment with both the dog and the main character. And as the book progresses, you hear a lot about the shed in the backyard. And he always says, don't go down the shed. And then something happens where he has to go down the shed. Da, da, da. And now you're in this fairy tale world. And it's just such a fun book. Definitely love the relationship between the dog and the boy in this book. Love the relationship between Charlie and his parents in this book. Love the relationship between Charlie and Howard Bodwich in this book. I think in general, just a very, very fun, clever, well-written book. If you want to go on an adventure, this is the way to do it. Kind of gives me Princess Bride vibes. No, it's not Princess Bride. It is Princess Bride. Princess Bride vibes from Disney, as well as like Alice falling through the looking glass door, you know, like that type of vibe where you just get transported from real life to a completely new world and you get to go on this adventure with this character. It's not scary. It's not terrifying. There are moments where it has a little bit of horror in it, but not like in a scary way. More like scary things happen in the book to this character, but nothing that is going to scare you. Nothing super gory. Nothing like terrifying or terrible, which I know is what Stephen King's usual genre is. So if you want to get a feel for Stephen King, but you don't want something that's too horrific or scary, this is a great place to start, and I would strongly recommend this to anyone. I understand completely why Stephen King is such a fan favorite for so many people and why he's a famous author and why there's movies made on his books, because his mind is brilliant. Like the way he writes is just incredible, and I can honestly say you get to see that in this book. So if you want a taste of Stephen King without having to read, let's say, The Shining, this is a great place to go. We're on to the last four. You guys ready? And then we have Finlay Donovan Jumps the Gun. This is the third book in the Finlay Donovan series. Again, part of the series video that I put out, so I'm not going to talk about it too much. But I would say that this is a great read for anyone who is interested in just like quirky, fun, crazy, modern day storylines, like, you know, that kind of fiction, contemporary fiction, humorous, and really about two strong female lead characters who are just trying to live their lives and are constantly finding themselves in pickles. All I'm going to say about it. It's great. It's a wonderful series. Siri's trying to talk to me. I don't know why. But would definitely recommend. Oh, by the way, when I said 4 left, I meant the physical books. We haven't gotten into the ones I listen on Audible. So, yeah, slightly there. Next up, I have The Do-Over by Lynn Painter. Now, Lynn Painter is one of my favorite young adult novelists. I think she just does a tremendous job with books in general. So Would definitely recommend this book. She also wrote Better Than the Movies, and I think Better Than the Movies is one of the best young adult novels I've ever read. And then this one's kind of like a Valentine's Day, like Groundhog Day vibe, where this is a young girl who's coming into her adulthood and recognizing herself, has always been a bit of a perfectionist, and just has gone through a lot. And so she ends up being in a position where she relives the same day over and over and over again, and she kind of wakes up with this new reality. And it's so well done. It's so well done. It's a beautiful, beautiful book. In fact, I'm pretty sure I bought this book for every single one of my best friends for their gifts for Valentine's Day because I loved this book that much. So definite 5-star read for me. Lynn Painter does it again. I feel like any Lynn Painter young adult book I will buy, I will read. And I'm so excited for the new one coming out in November. It is the sequel to Better Than the Movies, and I'm pumped for that. But this book was 10 out of 10, chef's kiss. Then we have a book that took the internet by storm. Now, this is also another fantasy book. You guys probably already know this. The second book in this series I felt like was not as great, but I'm still planning on reading the entire series. I'm looking forward to when Rebecca Yarros puts out the third book in the Empyrean series as well. But I will say I experienced Fourth Wing for the first time last year, and I loved this book. I ate this book up. I have the physical copy. I have audibled it. I have read it on my Nook. Like, I loved this book. And then the second book was like, meh. So the second book was like a solid 3 stars for me. There were things about the second book that I'm not a huge fan of, but I'm hoping she's like prepping it for the third book. So I'm excited to read the third one. But this book was incredible. I loved this book. So I would say if you're into fantasy, if you're into that whole like competition vibe, and you're into, coming into a sense of adulthood, and lovers to enemies, like those type of tropes, this is a great book. I think for anyone who is a new to fantasy reader, this is a great book. Just keep in mind the second book was not received with as much acclaim as this book was, but there is a reason why this book took the internet by storm, and it did grip my heart as well. And I love fantasy, so I would definitely recommend this for anyone who's looking for a good fantasy novel. And I definitely do still put this on top 23 of 23. The stack is getting perilously tall over here, so this last book, we're just going to put it back over here. But then I have Harry Potter. I always reread the Harry Potters every year. This is just a part of my childhood, a part of my lifeline, and I love these books. Sadly, I have not actually read this copy yet. I know I'm a bad person because it's just so gorgeous. But my husband got me these books for our anniversary last year, and so we are slowly collecting them. I have the first 5 and the first five that have been published so far. I know that Jim Kay, who is the illustrator for these illustrated versions of Harry Potter, has since retired from the project and is passing the baton on. I don't know who the new commissioned author is, but that being said, that also put a slowdown in the release of book 6 and 7. So we're hoping it'll come out this year, maybe next year for book 6, and then 7 is probably going to take another 2 years to come out after that. But I do plan on owning the full set eventually. But I always reread Harry Potter. I think there's a reason why Harry Potter has taken the globe by storm. I think there's a reason why J.K. Rowling is one of the richest human beings on the freaking planet. And I think there's a reason why no matter what movies they do, no matter what critical claims and awards they have received, all of the actors that were a huge part of this series are still recognized for their roles as Harry Potter and Hermione, and they have a fan following because this series is timeless to me. Like I feel like 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 years from now, people will be referring to Harry Potter as a phenomenon and a classic. And there's a reason why there's theme parks after it and movies after it. And that's all I really have to say about it. This will always be a huge part of my life. This is like my go-to escapism. Like if I'm just in a mood where I'm kind of down or I don't want to talk about something, or I just feel like re-entering into the world of Potter, I will. And so this is something that I do every single year, and forever and always. These will always be in the top 23, top 24, top 25, top 91, for God's sake. Well, not 91, I wasn't out in 91. But forever and always, this series will be top tier 5-star series for me. Specifically in this series, I know I'm holding up the Sorcerer's Stone, but I would say my favorite book is Prisoner of Azkaban. But for anyone who has not read Harry Potter, you won't regret it. You will enjoy it. I promise. If you don't enjoy it, that's also okay. I won't judge you harshly. I won't say that, there's anything wrong with you for not enjoying it. Maybe it's just not for you. But I would say 9 out of 10 people tend to love the series. So please, please, please read the book. The movies are also wonderful. And I'm going to get off my soapbox about Harry Potter now. Cool, cool. All right. So the last few books that I have that I wanted to share, I do not have physical copies of. So I have 4 books that I wanted to share, and I'm going to show you guys pictures. The first one is The Knockoff. This is by Lucy Sykes, and it's absolutely hilarious. If you're a fan of Devil Wears Prada, you will like this book. It is so funny. It is so goofy. It's basically about this woman who is in a top tier position as a female woman in the publishing industry, like very, very Devil Wears Prada vibes. And she is slowly getting turned out by the new incoming youngsters. And it's about how she navigates all of that and also deals with the mean girl in her office. So I would definitely recommend this for anyone who likes that vibe. It is hardcore fiction. It is hardcore contemporary fiction. It is hilarious. It's definitely worth reading, and it's just so beautifully done. Along that same thread, Lucy Sykes and Joe Piazza actually do it again in this book, which is Fitness Junkie. This is how I was introduced to this author. It was through my book club, Paper and Glam, which meets on Thursdays. This book is absolutely phenomenal as well. Strong 5-star read, very, very strong women characters, definitely like growing into their sense of self, deals with middle-aged women primarily in all of these books and kind of like their journey and midlife crisis to coming out of it. And it's so well done. The series is they're not series, they're standalones, but both books are just so beautifully done. And so I fully plan on reading every single book that these two women put out because they're just so well written. But would strongly recommend Fitness Junkie and The Knockoff for anyone who is interested in that high time, power, strong woman character going through midlife crisis, re-identifying herself vibe, but in the world of fashion. So just very well done series. This book is actually by Stephanie Meyer. It's called The Chemist. She's obviously the author who did the Twilight series as well. She is, in my humble opinion, a brilliant woman. I used to really enjoy the Twilight series when I was younger. I wouldn't say they're like amazing to me now as I have aged, but back then, like I really enjoyed that series. This book is a little bit different. It's more adulty, definitely for sure. Probably more host vibes, but not quite aliens. This book was very much about a woman who is absolutely brilliant at what she does. She is known as the chemist. She has been working for the government for years. She has developed very, very intriguing protocols and is like a very good interrogator. And now the government is after her and she's on the run. So it's basically her story. It's very, very fast-paced, action vibes. Never would have thought I would have enjoyed this book. Happened upon it, decided to listen to it, and did not regret it. Would strongly, strongly recommend this for anyone who's looking for fun, fast-paced thriller vibes with a strong, intelligent, STEM-related woman. Overall, very, very fun. Kind of gives you, I don't want to say Mr. and Mrs. Smith vibes, but that's what's popping into my head right now. But that's not correct at all. But it's a thriller. It's a great series. Or not great series. It's a great book. Great read. Would definitely recommend. And then last but not least, this book kind of breaks my heart, but I did thoroughly enjoy reading Matthew Perry's memoir. Obviously, as we all know, he did pass recently, which was devastating for many of us, especially those of us who have loved Friends and all the movies he's been in. This book was very eye-opening. It was very dear to me because it's him being raw. He talks about everything. He talks about his life. He talks about his fame. He talks about Friends. He talks about his chapters outside of Friends. He talks about his relationships. And he also talks about his very unhealthy relationship with fame, the need to be in the center of attention, and how he dealt with the alcohol and drugs that plagued him in his life. And I would say overall, this is a very, very powerful memoir. It did make me cry. I really enjoyed it, and it was very special to have this when he passed as well. That being said, I would strongly recommend this for anyone who is interested in a memoir that does touch on those topics. That's done in a very beautiful way, and I definitely did enjoy this memoir. And that brings us to a wrap with the top 23 of 2023. So thank you so much, guys, for joining me. Definitely list some of your favorite books down in the comments below, and I look forward to hearing everything you guys have enjoyed as well. As always, this is my Bookish Vibes channel, so if you guys are into books as well and you love to read anything books really, then please, please, please consider hitting that subscription and wow, I can't talk, guys. Please consider hitting that subscribe button and the notification bell so you know about any videos that may be coming up. I am always looking forward to hearing more from people in this community, and I just think that, you know, reading is so wonderful. It definitely expands your imagination. It just allows you to hold on to your childhood as well and live so many different lives and experience so many different things and learn so much. And so it's so nice to have a community to share that with. Thank you for hanging out with me, and I hope to see you guys again soon. I put out videos Wednesdays and Sundays, so please do stick around if you are interested. If not, thank you so much for joining me, and I really appreciate your time. As you can see, the lights are starting to go down, and my lighting is getting poor, so I will leave you guys here. Thank you for suffering through the horrible lighting with me and hanging out with me for 40 minutes, but it was such a pleasure, and until next time, bye guys.